Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Ask a Therapist with the Beard of Empathy. It's nice to be here this evening. Smooth my hair down a little bit there. I don't have too many people in the chat, but I'm here. Let's see if anybody else shows up. I'll do some talking in the meantime. I do have my call-in link on the screen up in the upper corner, straight up here, like over here. This. And the link should also be in the description. Let's see. Questions would be great. Anything anybody wants to ask of a therapist. I'm going to talk while I wait, see if anybody else has any questions or wants to call in. I'm just going to talk a little bit about anxiety. Uh, Anxiety starts with the amygdala, a little piece of your brain shaped like an almond. It's about the size of the tip of your pinky finger. We actually have one in each of our two hemispheres. They're what they do is just they monitor all of our sensory input, all of our thoughts, uh, for anything that is or could be dangerous. It's responsible for activating our fight or flight instinct because we need to be able to react to dangerous situations. The amygdala is a really tiny part of our brain. Uh, it has direct connections to other formations in the brain. Two of them in particular are the thalamus, which is part of our sensory cortex. Every sensory input that comes in from outside our body, and a few that uh, come from inside the body, go to the thalamus, and the thalamus then processes that information and sends it up to the prefrontal cortex. Before it sends that information up to the prefrontal cortex, it runs it through the amygdala first. The amygdala, if it detects anything in our current environment that is an actual danger, the amygdala reacts. It turns on the limbic system and prepares our body to fight or flee in that moment. Now, if there's nothing in our environment that is actually dangerous in that moment, uh, or the amygdala can't determine whether it's actually dangerous, it then turns to the hippocampus, which is another part of our brain that is part of our brain's memory retrieval and storage system. And the amygdala will ask the hippocampus, hey, do we have any memories that are like this, that are tagged as dangerous? The hippocampus will search through all of our memory banks and determine if we have any memories that are related and whether they were dangerous or not. If there are, the amygdala triggers, and it turns on the limbic system and prepares us for fight or flight. Now, our early ancestors, this was incredibly important. Um, most mammals, with most mammals, I'm a little quiet. Okay, let me turn it. How's that? A little bit better. I'll keep talking. Turn up the mic volume a little bit. Uh, so most mammals and most other animals we have a survival instinct, of course, uh, and it all comes to the amygdala. So it's a very important part of our brain. Okay, good. And you can imagine some of our earlier ancestors needing to use it to survive a day-to-day basis. When you're a creature that is as much prey as predator, or more prey than predator, as some of our early ancestors were more prey than predator, they have to be on the lookout for danger all the time. A couple moments ago, I mentioned that all the sensory information, except for the sense of smell, goes to the thalamus, and that's because the sense of smell goes directly to the amygdala. The amygdala takes care of a sense of smell because the sense of smell is the first indicator of predators sometimes, and one of the only ones that there's not much they can do about. Right? Most predators exude a smell, period. That's why a lot of animals are driven by sense of smell, predators and prey alike. Uh, because a predator can hide in shadows, it can hide under a bush and camouflage itself. It can move incredibly slowly to get in place before it strikes incredibly rapidly. Predators can do all of these things. They can move silently and until they're actually touching us. There's nothing we can do about it. So the sense of smell is the only sure sign of really being able to detect a predator. So if an animal that tends to have prey tends to be a prey animal, they catch a sense of smell, it is going to, or a scent of something that could be dangerous to them. They're going to take that and run, literally, and trigger the fight or flight instinct and get out of there. As it's not safe to stay. Uh, Humans are no different in that aspect. Um, we have the same mechanism. The difference primarily between human brains and many other brains is the prefrontal cortex. It's a lot more it's a lot more developed. It's a lot more complex. It allows us to do things like metacognition and prediction of future events. And that's the big thing is the prediction of the future. We can take past experiences and use them to determine a pattern for the future. And the ability to do that is not shared with many animals. There are a few, but not most. Um, yeah, dogs, of course, can anticipate, right? So can cats. Yeah. My dog, when I sit down in the chair in my living room, she comes over anticipating a reward, anticipating a treat, because that's been the pattern. She gets treats when I sit in that chair. So she's learned that. She can predict that. But the human ability to predict is much more developed, and predicting future events based on past experiences can be very beneficial, and it can also be very detrimental because we have this ability to predict the future. The amygdala is also tied into that system. It's not just monitoring our sensory data for things that could actually be dangerous in our environment. It's also monitoring our thoughts and our predictions about what could be dangerous. And here's the problem with the amygdala. They're stupid. They're really tiny. They don't have a lot of processing power at all. They are just kind of binary thinking portions of our brain. It's either this is safe or this is unsafe. It cannot tell the difference between something is actually dangerous in your environment around you and the thoughts that are passing through your head, even if they're just fantasy thoughts. No way that could possibly happen. If the amygdala thinks that, well, that can be dangerous, it's going to trigger. And yeah, it's problematic that way because it can trigger off a lot of different things. Now, our ability to predict the future and be prepared for danger situations is very, very important. It's kept us alive long enough to become what we are now. Uh, so being able to look at a situation, say that could be dangerous, and then get psyched up for it, get ready, get your heart rate increase, and get your breathing rate increase, and get your muscles all prepared for that fight or for that flight. Well, if you don't need it, well, you wasted a little bit of energy. If you do need it and you're not prepared for it, well, you could be dead. So wasting a little bit of energy is the preferable course of action, evolutionarily speaking. So that's what we do. We react. Our body burns energy to put us in a state of readiness for fight or flight before there's a danger. We get warmed up and ready for a foot race. Right? Two racers standing on a foot race, and they're going to do standing on a track, going to do a race. You get one person who's limbered up, and they've loosened up, and they're tense and in the ready position. They're down in that ready position, and their opponent who's going to race them is just standing there talking to people in the crowd, loosey goosey. And you walk over to the starting point, And then the starter pistol goes off. The one who's in the ready position, their muscles tense, already warmed up, that guy's going to take off the track. He's going to be gone. The one who's loosey goosey, it's going to take a second, maybe half a second, for them to recognize and kick into gear, and then their muscles are lethargic. They're not ready. So it takes longer to get up to speed. Same thing happens when we are faced with danger situations. If we get stuck in those danger situations, we got to be ready. The thing is that sometimes the things that we have aren't always actually dangerous. Right? It's advantageous thousands of years ago when our ancient ancestors would, before they were even fully human or fully hominid, being able to think enough, cognate enough that if they watched one of their family members who down by the river getting ready to get a drink, alligator comes up out of the water or a crocodile comes up out of the water, take them in, they're dead. If I'm the one watching that and I psych myself up before I go to the water, down to the water next time, well, if a crocodile does come out of the water, I'm prepared and more likely to be able to jump back. That trait passes down over and over and over again, gets more intense, more reactive as generations go by, and then we have the system that passed down to us. Now, that's wonderful when you have to live with literally every day. You could be eaten by a predator, but by and large, in America at least, we're not in that position. We don't have crocodiles in our or alligators in our watering holes, unless you live in Florida. That is. If I want to drink, I can just pick up my can. I have no alligators in there, no crocodiles either. It doesn't taste the least bit like lizard or reptile. But so we don't face the same kinds of dangers we did when the mechanism was developing. But it still exists. It's still there in our brain. So it gets used. It happens. It brain. The system is going to get used, and so it starts to tag on things that aren't actually physically dangerous to us. Tends to be things that we find uncomfortable or very uncomfortable. So we tag those things as anxietizing. Those things are tagged as being dangerous, and the amygdala does not really understand, because it's binary thinking, right? It's either safe or unsafe. It really doesn't understand, well, there's levels of safety, and like here I can be safe. It's just there's a threshold, and at a certain point, the amygdala goes, well, everything above this line, that's danger, and we're going to react. Anything below that line, we're not going to. And for some people, that threshold is fairly high. There's very little that triggers that anxiety. For other people, that threshold is much, much lower. And there are things that trigger anxiety. There's many, many, many more things that trigger anxiety. When we do start seeing triggers of anxiety that are problematic like that, we see patterns that happen of cycles of thinking, cyclical thinking. See, that's the wonderful thing about anxiety, is that it's really good at setting us up for the fight or flight instinct, and so it makes all sorts of changes in the body. Right? A lot of it is blood flow changes. There's releases of other hormones and chemicals, but one of the most important things is to get the muscles in the extremities more oxygen. They need more oxygen in order to be able to burn strong and fast, because they need to be able to burn fuel. So we get more oxygen, more fuel out to those muscles, some of the other hormones to help, endorphins and things to help the muscles be able to operate fast and strong, as fast and strong as possible. So we get all sorts of blood flow changes, and some of the areas that the blood flow changes is in our digestive system. The digestive system during a moment of fight or flight, the digestive system gets turned off. As one educator I heard once said, you don't need to be digesting lunch if you're about to be lunch. So, our ancient ancestors being chased down by a lion, we don't have time to be digesting the last thing we ate. So the body says, nope, we're going to get rid of. We need to either get rid of this or just stop. So if there's not much in the stomach, if there's nothing in the stomach, it just kind of shuts down. If there's anything in the stomach tries to figure out how to get rid of it. Right? If it's been there for a while, it's kind of pasty, it increases its motility, trying to push things down to get empty. If there's too much or it's not moving easily enough, the stomach will try to get rid of it the other way. Instead of pushing it down, it tries to push it up. It just kind of get it evacuated. Um, if we're being chased by a predator and we have too much in our stomach, that weight can slow us down enough to get caught. If we get rid of it, if we get it out, then we can save that weight. There are animals that use projectile vomiting as a defense mechanism. Humans don't really do that. We could, I suppose, if we really wanted to. If you know you projectile vomit well, you could use that as a defense mechanism. A very gross one. That'd probably be very, very effective, as long as you can aim it at the person who's coming at you or the animal. But in general, it's still advantageous for us to empty our stomach. So when anxiety hits, we can see some nausea happening. Right? We have symptoms like we're working out at first, like we get a heart rate increase because we got more blood flow going out. We got a respiration rate increasing because we have to have more oxygen, so we have to breathe more. Um, Whenever blood flow increases, we see the body start to heat up. So we might see sweating starting. And then the blood flow in the gut changes and it shuts down, which can lead to that nausea. But at the other end of the digestive system is pretty much the same thing. If we're holding a lot of weight in the colon, we're going to get the urge to get rid of it. Many mammals will evacuate their bowel the moment danger comes into their senses. Well, rabbits will shoot out pellets really quickly and then take off. So those few ounces could make the difference between life and death. Holding on to it can mean you die. Getting rid of it, you're more likely to live. Humans have the same kind of thing. We react similarly. So we might feel, if there's anything in the colon, we might feel the need to evacuate it. Same thing with the bladder. If our bladder is overly full, we get the urge to evacuate that because it's extra weight and we don't need to keep it. So our body wants to get rid of it because it's shutting down the digestive system, at least for a little while. But changes in blood flow happen in the brain too. Blood flow to the sensory cortex, to the thalamus and other sensory portions of the brain, that tends to increase because we need to be able to process our sensory information faster, better. That's why a lot of people, when they're in a danger situation, they say time seemed to slow down. It's not because time actually slowed down, it's because their perception of things got faster. Their ability to process things got faster. And if the blood flow is moving towards that area, the brain has to move away from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is the prefrontal cortex. That's the big thinky part of our brain. The thinky part of our brain is the wonderful part. It's the part that holds our imagination, our self-control, all of the stuff that makes us who we are. Our identity is formed in the prefrontal cortex. Our ability to think is in the prefrontal cortex. All of our feelings, we become consciously aware of them in our prefrontal cortex. It's the best part of our brain, in my opinion, because it helps us with the thinking. And pretty much that's all we are, is thinking and meat. We're thinking meat, kind of walking around, just thinking about stuff. And then thinking about thinking. That's the metacognition stuff. We get into the changes in the blood flow in the brain. The prefrontal cortex gets less blood flow, which means it can't process as well. More blood flow to a part of the brain means better processing, which means less blood flow is worse processing. So our thinking, our ability to think, slows down. So I've heard people can make very terrible decisions in danger situations. It's the prefrontal cortex is just not as active as it otherwise would be. Uh, in some ways, I think that when a person in general is in a dangerous situation, they should not be faulted for any decisions that they make in that situation, no matter how bad they tend to be, because it's a coercion on the brain. Now, I caveat that with police officers and to some extent active military, are are more or less exempt from that rule for me, because they are trained to overcome that particular negative functionality. They're drilled with what to do in situations like that. Firefighters as well. They're drilled on how to respond. And firefighters are way better in that situation, because they usually make better decisions. They also drill way more than most other professions when it comes to being able to think during a life and death situation. It's not anxiety at that moment. Fire, running into a house that is on fire, is like that takes a lot of self control. It takes a lot of ability to manage the fight or flight instinct. Whereas the fight or flight instinct also is a thing that helps them to move faster and react to things faster. But they have that training to be able to maintain their thinking through that. Most people don't get that training. And, you know, police officers and military, they do get some of that training. And so when we have a police officer engaged in a shooting, um, or an untrained ICE officer who is engaged in a shooting of an innocent woman, well, I do fault them, because he should have been trained to be able to maintain his thinking in that crisis situation. The fact that he wasn't is the fault of our federal government. Um, it shows a very terrible situation. But most people, they don't get that training. So when anxiety comes up, our ability to think becomes diminished. So we end up in a situation where a thought comes into our head, anxiety triggers, and then we kind of end up in a cycle. The thought that triggered the anxiety comes back around. And remember, the amygdala is so stupid that it can't tell the difference between a thought and something in your actual reality. It also can't tell the difference between a thought you had a minute ago and the thought you're having right this second, which might be an identical thought. It can't tell the difference. So it triggers again. And then when the thought comes back around, it triggers again. And again and again and again and again and again. And this is where some people can end up in a situation where they just have low grade anxiety a lot of the time, or get into long periods of time where they have low to mid grade anxiety. Uh, Generally, we see that in a lot of anxiety disorders, like generalized anxiety disorder is just worry and anxiety about a variety of things. So some things have been tagged as dangerous, and the amygdala is just overactive and going to town on every little thing. Needs to have anxiety, and then that anxiety level just kind of cruises along at a steady higher than should be state. Right? If the anxiety is a 1 to 10 scale, then the anxiety this person might be experiencing might be like a 3 or a 4 on 1 to 10 scale. 1 being like almost no anxiety whatsoever, 10 being the worst anxiety I've ever experienced. They might be sitting at a 3, maybe a 4, but like for long periods of time. Some people sit at like a 1 most of the time, and then occasionally get anxiety when they're going to do a specific thing that pops it up to 5 or 6. And then some people just end up sitting at 4, like for hours. The other thing that can happen is that this cycling of thoughts happens very, very rapidly, and the anxiety, each time the anxiety ticker ticks up by 1, it also increases the intensity by 1. So the intensity and the speed at which it happens increases, and so we see a rapid increase in anxiety symptoms and severity. And it gets really bad. We're going from like a 1 to a 10 inside of 2 or 3 minutes. Uh, and then the problem at that point is that it takes a while, because of the cyclical thinking, it takes a while for that anxiety to come down. Uh, that's what we call a panic attack. And when it happens that rapidly, that intensely, we call that a panic attack. And then people just end up sitting with that anxiety for long periods of time. And when it happens, when the anxiety has so many things that trigger it, that it starts getting in the way of being able to function in multiple areas of life, that's when it becomes a mental health disorder. But literally everybody experiences anxiety. Like, everybody experiences anxiety. If you have an amygdala, you have experienced anxiety at some point in your life. Uh, it's just a thing. It's part of being human. No reason why it should be thought of as a terrible thing. It's trying to do its job. It's trying to keep you safe. A lot of times when we have undue anxiety or excessive anxiety, it's because the amygdala is too strong. Right? Any system in our body, any and every system in our body, gets stronger the more we use it. Which means when the amygdala gets worked out a ton, it gets really strong. And it's hard to turn it off. It's because the counter system in our body that does turn it off isn't strong enough anymore. So we have to end up having to work on that. These two systems are called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is just the body's on switch. It is the system that prepares our body for any kind of action. Right? If something could be dangerous, it triggers the anxiety reaction, the fight or flight reaction. Be ready for running or fighting. If it's not that, it could be some other action we're preparing for. It could be something like sex. Right? We see somebody that we find attractive and we have certain physiological reactions. That's the sympathetic nervous system preparing the body for the act of sex. Any other thing where we have a preparation stage, right? Like digestion has a preparation stage. Walk into a restaurant and smell something delicious, and your mouth starts watering. That's the beginning of the digestive system. That's the sympathetic nervous system preparing you for the intake of food. The full deeper digestion is a rest activity. So it's odd for the sympathetic nervous system, which carries our active things, to prepare us for digestion, but it's just preparing us for the intake of food. Like, once we intake the food, we get tired. Right? But we smell something delicious, it means that we're about to have food. And so we need to begin the eating process. And the eating is active. The digestion is not. The digestion is rest. So the body gets prepared for action by the sympathetic nervous system by preparing our digestion, by preparing our salivary glands so that we can lubricate the food going down. Be great. But once we have finished the eating task, the body triggers the other system, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the body's off switch. It's a series of glands throughout the body, glands and nerves throughout the body that produce chemicals and reactions to prepare the body for rest and digestion. The vagus nerve is one of the biggest ones. I see a lot of vagus nerve stimulators on the market coming these days, and it works because the vagus nerve is one of the biggest nerves in the body, and it's primarily part of the parasympathetic nervous system. It sends the signal for rest and sleep to most areas of our body, which means stimulating it gets it working, which tends to turn off the other systems in our body, or at least turn them down, ready for sleep and rest. Anything you can do with those stimulators, you can actually do without them as well, by doing deep breathing exercises and humming, because the vagus nerve is in your throat, runs down your throat, There's actually a branch of it that also runs down past your heart and then back up. It's got the laryngeal extension of the vagus nerve, if I'm correct. Uh, and so they sit right next to your larynx, and so by humming, you vibrate the nerve. It stimulates it a little bit. The nerve also passes behind your diaphragm, passes behind and around your diaphragm. So if you squeeze your diaphragm as hard as possible, it will help to stimulate the vagus nerve down in the mid portion of your chest. So if you breathe out for double the length of time that you breathe in, you're really forcing the air out. You're stimulating the vagus nerve down on that in that area. So that can help to promote a sense of calm and safety because it's preparing your body for rest and digestion. But when we end up with patterns of cyclical anxiety thinking and anxiety getting really strong, the amygdala triggering over and over and over again and getting a workout all the time, like it gets really strong. But the thing that doesn't happen is that the parasympathetic nervous system doesn't get the same workout. It doesn't get the same uh, amount of energy, right? So it doesn't get as strong, which means it then become the sympathetic nervous system, especially the anxiety system, gets so much stronger that it's really almost impossible to calm down until you're like actually asleep, until you're exhausted enough that your brain just has to shut down, which is problematic for many people. So anxiety it's a hard thing to deal with when it's over um, when it becomes overwhelming, when it happens way too often, um, and when it's triggered by incredibly mundane little things. You know, and it can get really bad for some people, and some people develop their own strategies for how to reduce that anxiety. They have specific things that they do that, if anxiety comes up, they do that thing, and it helps the anxiety come down. Um, and sometimes they they know that if they don't do something, anxiety will happen. So they know, like, if I don't check the stove before I leave the house, the anxiety is going to get bad because if I don't check, then I don't know, and if I don't know, then I'm just going to be thinking about it all day and getting more and more anxious because the house could burn down if I left the stove on. It just becomes cyclical thinking from there, and that's the low level of anxiety. Um, when we have a bunch of things like that, where we have these acts that we have to do in order to keep anxiety from happening or to reduce anxiety once it is happening, uh, we end up with anxiety. We're trying to control anxiety. That's called compulsions. Does autistic / ADHD stimming have anything to do with this? Not really. Um, the stimming, from what I've read, the stimming in autism and ADHD is more about the brain trying to get more stimulation because it's underactive. The whole thing with ADHD and autism, or the ADHD specifically, is different areas of the brain that are underperforming. And with autism, there's some of that as well. So stimming is your brain trying to make itself more active, as trying to boost its own productivity. Because some of the stuff is really low. So we're trying to soothe ourselves by doing something. Yes, and I do say we because I do have ADHD, so I'll be sitting there. I'm not allowed to have pens with clickers in meetings. Just click, 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 click. I will do that without even thinking about it, because my brain just wants that stimulation. But the anxiety kind of thing, that's different. Because it's cyclical thinking that is because the thought gets stuck by the change in blood flow, and we get the thought patterns that continue it. The stimming stuff is not the same. Um, the bouncy leg, that can be related to anxiety. Is not always a stimming thing. That can happen. The jitteriness, it's not just legs. Sometimes it's in arms. That's because our limbs have been activated, right? The anxiety activates us for ready to act, for action. So we're kind of tense and in a state of um, ready to act. And the longer we sit in this state, we're just tense, and then our muscles start doing this. So the jittery feeling, the bouncy leg usually is associated with the jittery feeling, but it's the restlessness that comes with the need to fight or flee. Um, Now, ADHD and autism do have a restlessness component to it. It is one of the symptoms for ADHD, at least. On the under the hyperactive side of things, is for adults is feelings of jitteriness or restlessness when stationary for too long. I think everybody who's stationary for too long ends up with some jitteriness or some restlessness. But with ADHD and autism, it happens way more quickly um, because the relationship with time is weird. But when it comes to anxiety, it's because of the need to act. Our body's activated; it's been turned on for action and is now in a holding pattern. Because we're not acting, we're not actually running, we're not actually fighting. So we're just in this state of readiness, and the muscles are just ready. The whole body's just ready. And when we're on that cycle of thinking, our body just ends up being ready all the time, as long as that anxiety is going. Now, with the actions that people take in order to try and stop anxiety from happening in the first place, or to reduce it once it does happen, enough of those and strong enough of those can be compulsions. We're compelled to do these things on a regular basis, and sometimes we have thought patterns that get stuck. We also have thoughts that once we start the thought, we can't let go of it like at all. And those are obsessions. And when we have one or both of them together, then it causes a lot of anxiety, and it takes a big chunk of someone's day to minimize the obsessions or to carry out the compulsions. I think it's an hour or more a day. Um, that's where we can get into obsessive compulsive disorder, which is different from obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They're distinctly different. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder, it tends to center around cleanliness, but also is a thought pattern of obsessions and actions to be done. And it's not always in relation to an increase in anxiety. It's a it's a pattern of thinking and behaving that is ingrained. Um, Someone with OCPD can experience anxiety when it happens, but it's not necessary for them to engage in order for them to be engaging in the obsessions and compulsions. Um, and those obsessions and compulsions with the OCPD, um, they don't always relate at all to anxiety. Sometimes it's just this is the way things have to be done, and just a rigid thinking on some of those things. But again, the compulsions and obsessions have to take up a significant amount of time in the day. So the biggest difference, I think, between OCD and OCPD is the presence or intensity of the anxiety. Uh, Anxiety can do a number on people. I talk about anxiety a lot in sessions because a lot of people experience anxiety. And we get some moments of peace in between things that seem dangerous. Um, but there's a lot of things that people do to try and reduce anxiety, but some of them aren't healthy. Uh, some people self-medicate with substances. Some people throw themselves into relationships, trying not to think about their own things. They think about somebody else entirely. Um, for long periods of time, they are just deflecting off of themselves to keep from thinking about their own stuff, so that they can reduce the anxiety. These kinds of things form patterns of negative behavior for that person. Negative is individualized. Uh, when the individual is saying this is problematic, then it's a negative behavior. And when they have enough of those, they usually come see someone like me. And we sit down and talk about the things that are causing anxiety. And I do some psychoeducation on anxiety with them. I tell them uh, all the same stuff I just said here. This is what anxiety is. It's a lot easier to uh, challenge some of the negative thought patterns that come up because of anxiety when you understand that you don't have a choice. It's not a conscious thing. A lot of people have the thoughts like, why am I such an anxious person? You don't have any control over that. Your amygdala does. It's not a thing that you choose to do. Uh, we can let go a little bit of some of that negative thought patterns about ourselves when it's nothing that we have. Like we don't, most of us don't judge ourselves for being, a negative person if we have a broken leg. We have an accident, break our leg. We usually don't sit there and go like, I'm a terrible. We might say I'm a klutz, but uh, we don't say like, why am I like this? Why am I this broken-legged person? Like, I'm such a terrible person because I have this broken leg. Like we usually don't do that, but we do it a lot with mental health issues. We internalize it and make it about who we are, and it never, how it always this way. Um, when the reality is that these things usually take a break from time to time. There are times when we're not feeling this way. And if we can get to one of those times, we get a brief respite from negativity that might be coming up. And then if we can have that time and recognize it, we can start building on that time, building on the ability for us to generate our own peace, our own feeling of safety. That's the goal, is to reprogram the amygdala, reprogram it to not react as much to those specific things, to foster a sense of safety and build a sense of safety with ourselves, so that we can tell the amygdala to just shut up. I don't need you right now. I'm looking at the situation, and rationally I can see how to handle this. Right? Very few people uh, have died just from public speaking. I can say that. Very few people have died just from public speaking. Of all the people who have ever done public speaking, very few of them have died while public speaking. It does happen, but it's very rare. And of the people who have died while they were doing public speaking, almost none of them died because they were public speaking. And usually there were bullets involved, or heart attack. Um, Potentially heart attack might be related to some anxiety kicking up, but the actual public act of speaking in public hasn't ever really killed anybody. But there's millions of Americans who are terrified of public speaking, and doing it more and more makes them more comfortable. That's one of the reasons why exposure therapy is one of the most recommended and most evidence-based practices for dealing with anxiety and trauma. Because exposing ourselves and safely managing to make it through things that are similar to anxiety triggers is going to help reprogram and desensitize the amygdala to those things. It's a very important therapy and therapeutic model. Um, Sometimes it involves actually like really going to a site, or something like that, but usually it's exposure in a more esoteric way. Not esoteric. No, it's exposure in a more symbolic way, I guess. If I had somebody who had arachnophobia and I wanted to do exposure therapy, I would start with um, an overly large, brightly colored, cartoonish looking spider plushie toy. I wouldn't have it visible at first, and I'd introduce it slowly. After talking about this is what we're going to do, we're going to start with this big plushie, and we're going to sit there and we're going to get through being with that safely. And then over the course of successive sessions, I would get smaller plushies that are more realistically colored, and then smaller and smaller until I get to like life-size spiders that have much more realistic color. And eventually, if the client is ready, and we both agree, we might bring in somebody's pet tarantula and deal with the spider that way, like exposure. And some of those can be really, really good success stories. It's more than 1 or 2 sessions to do this. It can be 10 or 15 sessions before we get down to like realistic looking spiders, much less the actual live spider. And it's not just desensitization through exposure, repeated exposure. It's actually fostering that sense of safety. Part of exposure therapy should always be maintaining that sense of safety. Like if I'm talking in the session and I've got this spider on the couch next to me and my client over on the other side of the room there, I'm going to try and maintain a safe environment. Keep my tone safe. It's not going to move, no sudden movements. If we're going to have the person touch it, we move it slightly closer to them and then let them come the rest of the distance. That way they're in control of what's going on. They get to be safe, and just trying to foster in general a sense of safety in a therapeutic room is always important. I think the most important part of the exposure therapy isn't the actual exposure. It's the maintaining safety during the exposure, because we have to teach the amygdala that this thing is not dangerous. That sometimes tough when it comes to spiders, because some of them really are dangerous. I don't want to get bitten by a black widow or get like brown recluse or anything like that. Tarantula is not that bad. As far as I know, most species of tarantula, their venom isn't very dangerous to humans. I could be wrong. I am not a spider guy. I'd like to be a spider guy. I think it'd be really fun, swinging through the city of New York, Manhattan, lots of tall buildings. That spider guy. Wait, sorry, Spider-Man. Spider-Man. I'd love to be Spider-Man. A Spider-Man. I'd like to be a Spider-Man, not the Spider-Man. Peter Parker's life is way more chaotic than I'd like, but I wouldn't mind the spider powers, being able to climb on walls. And let's be honest, eh, they have hairs that cause tarantulas do have hairs that cause irritation. It's one of their defense mechanisms. They just fluff, like release a cloud of hairs, um, because they're small enough to be predator or to be prey as well. Uh, Even though they are primarily predator species, there are other things that prey on them, so they have their own defenses. It's a pretty good defense on their part, because the venom in their bite is supposed to be not for defense but for offense. It's meant for the prey because it starts helping to digest it. So that's why they use it. So using the thing you're going to use to digest your food later, something that has to recharge over time, using that is disadvantageous if you're doing it for defense. Let those little hairs, get a bunch of them out there. They can grow back really quickly. It'll save your life if you don't have to use it too often. Just like Spider-Man running out of web fluid. You run out of hairs. Poor tarantula. Naked and defenseless. Just like Spider-Man sometimes, naked and defenseless. He usually figures it out. He's only died a couple of times in the comics. Spider-Man. Which is another good point on how we deal with anxiety in therapy, especially when we're dealing with kids. Is actually I talk to kids about anxiety like it's Spider-Man's Spidey sense, and it's a superpower. Especially kids who deal with a lot of anxiety, right? Because that negative thinking about ourselves really kicks in and can be really problematic. So we want to help them begin building that sense of safety and teaching a kid that Spidey sense is a superpower, and it helps you to feel safe. Helps begin the reprogramming for kids that young. I've used the same line with adults as well, and it really helps them understand what the anxiety is. So, uh, Spider Guy swinging through the city, helping people with their spider problems. Um, and then Spider Man swinging and helping people with their crime problems, and getting cats out of trees, and helping little old ladies cross the road. Biggest problem is the lady didn't want to cross the road, but Spider Man still picked her up and carried her across the road anyway. He was just swinging by. He thought he was doing right. He wasn't. And that old woman was J. Jonah Jameson's mother, and that's why Jameson hates Spider-Man. That's absolutely not true to the comics, although it wouldn't surprise me if that ended up in there somewhere. It'd be funny. That's been my diatribe on anxiety, and I'm hoping that as this goes by, I will be able to get more and more people, more and more subscribers, and I hope that people learn something at least from these videos. Even if I don't have any callers, I'm rambling about something that somebody could find important. So I'm going to end my live stream there, as I haven't had any callers, uh, and I think I've talked out anxiety as much as I can right now. Uh, uh, Take care. Have a good one.